Okay, I have my phone here to keep the time, because I know we have only 10 minutes. So as Jenny said, my name is Cristina Bradatan, and I'm from the sociology department. I'm actually a demographer, which means that I'm interested in what's happening with population, generally speaking. And what I want to talk about today is this particular situation where you have drought in a developed country, in this particular case in Texas. What's happening, how people are fighting, for water, right? So this is actually part of a larger project. If you remember, those of you who were here last month, thank you, Dameri, who's a hydrologist, talked about drought in Texas, and I'm part of his team working on this particular topic, and I'm focusing on the social aspects of drought. So basically this whole idea, this whole project started with, what we know, that basically there will be more and more, actually more intense drought in, all over the world, but especially in those parts that already experience drought, and in this particular case, Texas. And hydrologists show that basically Texas is not really prepared to deal with these, problems related to drought. So that's, the let's say the context. So basically what I'm focusing on, as I said, is on social conflicts. What's happening when there is, a high drought, lack of water in a region. And let me talk a little bit about the literature on this topic, general literature, global literature. And when you look to, drought and climate change, one of the topics that, researchers look to is what's happening with agriculture, right? So because of climate, how agriculture will be impacted because of climate change. And this is actually, it's a map showing how, productivity, climate change will affect productivity all over the world. Now, there is a lot of research focusing on developing countries and especially on African countries, and that's for two reasons. The first reason is that climate change will have a strong impact on, in particular on Africa, and secondly because African countries tend to be, poorer than in the other parts of the world, so it is expected that they will have, fewer resources to deal with climate change. Now, as I said, when you look to global literature, the idea is that, research shows that when persistent drought happen in a region, people will migrate. Now, once again, this is about developing countries, where basically they don't have irrigation in many cases, or very limited irrigation, and people don't really have access to other resources except for moving to the closest urban centers. Right, so looking for other ways to survive. So how global community is dealing with this? Basically, is dealing with this by investing money in climate change adaptation, because there is this, and I put there fear factor, this idea that, well, there will be more drought, because of that there will be more migration, and some of these people actually will be international migrants. And this is a persistent theme, especially in European research, where there is this idea that there will be an increasing number of Africans actually moving to Europe because of this climate changes. So here I just wanted to show you how much money is actually, spent globally on climate change adaptation. And as I said, when you look to the literature, one idea is that developed countries invest or have a strong interest in investing in this climate change adaptation, precisely because there will be some kind of, even if they might not be directly impacted by climate change, they'll be indirectly impacted by, let's say, these migrants who will have to move somewhere, right? And some of them will move internationally. Now, I was surprised actually to find that there is not a lot of talk about what will happen in developed countries in terms of when drought actually, hits areas. And I guess this is because it is supposed that, developed countries have resources to deal with this, so there will be not big problems, there will be not big conflicts when some regions are affected by this. Let me just look to, okay, doing well. So this is actually from Venky's presentation 1 month ago. And one of the things, or one thing that he emphasized is that despite the fact that Texas, has good irrigation systems and so on, what's happening is that we already used a lot of the groundwater that we have available. So there is this, kind of new line of research showing that if a persistent drought happens in Texas, basically there will be not enough water, to satisfy all the needs that are in this state. So when we look to when we look to let's say types of situations that we have in Texas, basically there are three types of situations. There are many counties that are almost all agriculture, very small communities, but mostly agriculture. So those are counties where most of the water actually goes to agriculture. Right? Those are the big, let's say, users. Then there is this combination of farming and I call them macro statistical areas. For example, they put Lubbock usually in Crosby County. So there are these counties where there is a fairly large, city like Lubbock, and most of the water is actually used by agriculture. And then there is this third situation where there is a combination of fracking industry using water, and then there is farming and these micro or macro statistical areas. So, and as I said, this is a project that we are starting to work on. We want to focus on these three types of counties and look to what happened in 2011. And why 2011? Where that was the year when a very significant drought affected Texas, right? So we want to look and see how actually people negotiated, institutions actually negotiated, access to water. Who got the most? Who had priority in terms of access to water? Now, one of the problems with this is that because 2011 was such a big drought, we don't really have very good groundwater data for several counties. And this is the part that actually, Venky is working on. So we really need good data about the quantity and access to water in order to see what happened. Now, data, how do we access, what kind of data we use for this? USDA has actually a list of farmers who applied for disaster relief for many years, including 2011, and I just put some, it's a long table, I just copied some of these farmers, well, farms, not necessarily farmers, and they have the information, who's actually managing the farm, because that's important. It's not the owner is not necessarily important, but the manager is important. So we plan on contacting these people who received disaster relief in 2011, and talk to them and see how why they didn't have access to water, right? That's basically, or what happened with their access to water in this particular case. We also have demographic information on these areas. These are, there are plenty of information available. It's the ACS, which is the American Community Survey, and they have, the good thing about this survey is that they have information about small areas. So generally we have information about small areas during the census years, like 2010. However, ACS is also bringing us some information about small areas in other years. It's a micro, what we call a micro census. And there is also micro level information on farms from the USDA. And there is actually, they have what is called a Census of Agriculture. And the latest one is done they do it every 5 years. And the latest one is done in 2012. The problem with that, so basically what we plan on doing is first contact this and do surveys, and then also going in the field and talking with farmers and talking with people from fracking industry. about what happened in 2011. So in order to understand what happened in 2011. Now, let me talk a little bit, and I'm actually doing well, right? About problems, because there are lots of problems that we expect. One problem is lack of response. Sometimes people don't want to respond to this survey. Farmers in particular, one way to deal with this is going through networks. And it just happens that I have somebody in my department is actually owns farmland, and her family actually owns farmland. So I plan on going through her and connecting, having personal connections with the farmers, and it's easier in this way to make them talk. Another problem that I don't know if it's a problem but it might be, USDA doesn't really give easy access to this micro level data. You need to actually have some certain, the university has to have certain, to impose certain requirements on this, databases. So that's, I think, is negotiable. And as I said, the big problem is this. First of all, not necessarily the communities are getting the water from their own county. Lubbock is one example, right? We don't really get a lot of water from, the Lubbock County. So we have to pay attention to that, but that's not a big problem because we already know the geography and who's getting water from where. The other problem, as I said, is the lack of very good information about what happened in 2011 for some counties, and precisely because of this drought. Because the drought was so big that basically the instruments that they had were not, strong enough to capture the low level of water. So that's a problem that I have no idea how we'll deal with that, but Venki should do that. Okay, and that's about it. So I'm good.
Show the last slide, just so we can read it. Yeah.
Okay. So basically, what are the questions? So what we expect to see here is how the conflicts are mitigated. It's obvious that there is a conflict, and actually we have some information about what happened in Austin. There was the situation that two farmers actually wanted access to water, but at the same time, if they would get the water, Austin area will be left without water. So there are these social conflicts between different groups. You have a large metropolitan area, then you have these farmers, right, and they lose money. Basically, they lose money in this situation, and then of course it's fracking industry, and there are lots of discussion about that. Some let's say wells actually are using brackish water, so that's not let's say in some cases they don't come into conflict with the other areas. In some cases, they actually use, good water. So that's another situation. So who's winning, and what's the process basically? What's the mechanism? How people actually deal with this situation? And the other thing, and that's also it's something that I'm interested, who's getting blamed for lack of water? And one thing that I see in the let's say in the literature, and also I'm in several let's say fracking groups, and I see that fracking industry gets a lot of blame for using people's water, and this might, especially in a region like Texas where we already have problems with water, this might be a big problem for the fracking industry, and something that they don't really deal well with. So that's something that I'm also interested in. So that's about it.
Thank you. That was very interesting. All right, we have time for one or two questions.
Yes.
This is fabulous. And you're right, there's a lack of data on the drought for how much quantity of water we have right now. But the good news is we just started working on a project, and we should have the water quantity for all the counties overall through 2014.
Oh, that's cool.
So
yeah.
welcome to it.
Okay.
That's why we have these seminars. That's awesome.
Yeah.
Anybody else? I'll ask a question. Sure.
So are you going to be doing surveys with the fracking industry?
Yes, that's the idea. Yeah.
And how are you going to go with that?
Face-to-face interviews. And that's a problem, another problem. Now, one thing that we thought about is, how to motivate them to answer. And the idea is, this is a good PR for you. So if you tell me how you deal with drought and how that that you really try to help with this, right? That's a good PR for you.
Yeah.
If you don't want to answer, then I will just say, they just don't care, right? So that's
very sneaky. Any other questions? Sociology with a little bit of psychology. Great. Thank you so much again.
Thank you.